All right, let's get right into it. Forget everything you thought 2026 was going to be about. On February 28th, the world shifted on its axis. A massive new war has just erupted in the Middle East, and we're about to break down exactly who's fighting, what lit the fuse, and what it means for every single one of us.
So yeah, this isn't just another regional flare-up, not even close. In capitals all around the globe, leaders are already calling this the Middle East War of 2026, and believe me, it is sending some serious shockwaves through global politics.
You know, every war has a beginning, right? A single moment where everything just changes. For this conflict, that moment was February 28th, 2026. That's the day the US and Israel launched a massive, coordinated series of airstrikes against Iran. This wasn't a warning shot. This was day one of the war.
Okay, so first things first. Probably the question on everyone's mind is, who is fighting whom? Let's break down the key players in this thing because it's getting complicated fast.
When you boil it all down, the conflict really centers on two main sides. You've got the United States and its closest ally in the region, Israel, forming a kind of Western alliance. And on the other side, you have the Islamic Republic of Iran. These are the main combatants, the core of the conflict.
But of course, it's never that simple, is it? This war is already pulling in a whole host of other key players. You've got Hezbollah, Iran's heavily armed and funded proxy in Lebanon, getting deeply involved. At the same time, major Gulf countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE are on high alert. And then you have nations like Iraq and Jordan, who suddenly find themselves right on the front lines because they host U.S. military bases.
All right, so that's the who. Now for the really big question, why? Why did this all kick off now? A war on this scale doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Let's dig into the pressures that have been building for years and finally led to this explosion. So the immediate spark, the thing that lit the powder keg, was that huge coordinated air campaign on February 28th. We're talking devastating strikes that took out key military infrastructure inside Iran. But here's the absolute game changer. Reports quickly surfaced that Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was actually killed in those attacks. I mean, that's a move that makes a massive Iranian retaliation pretty much inevitable. But that trigger event didn't happen in a vacuum. What's so important to understand here are the layers behind it. For years, three major pressures were just building and building. First, you've got the constant fear in the US and Israel that Iran was right on the verge of getting a nuclear bomb. Second, there was this bigger power struggle for control of the Middle East, with Iran using proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas to expand its influence. And third, well, it's the deep historical hostility, especially between Iran and Israel, that's been simmering since 1979. And this slide really shows you where we are right now. It's a devastating tit for tat. The US and Israel are pressing their advantage, continuing this campaign of airstrikes against targets inside Iran. And Iran's response? They've unleashed this huge wave of retaliatory drone and missile attacks. And they're not just aiming at Israel, they're hitting targets all across the entire region. So you might be thinking, okay, this is happening halfway around the world. Why does it matter to me? Well, let's zoom in on the impact for a country like India. It's a perfect example of just how interconnected our world is and how a war anywhere can absolutely be felt everywhere. It really comes down to one crucial thing: energy. India imports a staggering 85% of its oil. I mean, just think about that number. And a massive chunk of that oil comes directly from or has to pass through the Middle East. This war puts that absolutely vital supply line in extreme danger. And when that energy supply is at risk, you get this painful economic domino effect. It's pretty simple, really. When oil is threatened, the price you pay for petrol and diesel is going to skyrocket. That directly leads to higher prices for everything else: food, transport, you name it. And at the same time, it puts a ton of pressure on the value of the rupee, pushing it lower. But beyond the economics, there is a huge human cost here for India. We're talking about roughly 90 lakh, that's 9 million Indian citizens who work across the Middle East. Suddenly, their safety, their jobs, and the critical money they send back home to their families are all at risk. So all of this, it leads us to the most terrifying question of all, doesn't it? Could this actually become a new world war? Let's just be direct about it, because this is a question that's keeping leaders and probably a lot of us awake at night. Are we actually watching the opening moves of World War III? The thing is, the path from a regional war to a full-blown world war really depends on what the other big powers do. If a country like Russia or China decides to jump in and back Iran directly,
Or if the conflict spreads and a NATO ally gets attacked, then the potential for a global catastrophe becomes terrifyingly real. Okay, so let's be super clear here. Right now, as of today, this is still officially a regional war. The world's major powers are all calling for restraint, but the situation is just incredibly volatile. Every single day carries the risk of a miscalculation that could change everything. And the economic stakes for the entire planet, they just couldn't be higher. It all hinges on this tiny choke point, a little strip of water called the Strait of Hormuz. A massive percentage of the world's oil has to pass through it. If Iran manages to shut that down, as this quote makes clear, the shock to the system could easily trigger a worldwide recession.
So let's do a super quick recap of what we've covered. Who's fighting? At its core, it's the US and Israel versus Iran. When did it all start? February 28th, 2026. And why? Well, it's that toxic mix of nuclear fears, a regional power struggle, and just old, deep-seated hatred. And the impact, as we saw with India, means immediate economic pain, higher oil prices, and soaring inflation.
And that brings us to the final, massive, unanswered question. For years, India, like a lot of other nations, has played a careful balancing act, maintaining relationships with both sides. But if this conflict goes global, that time for balancing might be over. It might have to choose a side. And the question is, which way would it turn? The answer to that could very well shape the New World Order.